Hey, so has anyone heard of this show called The Amazing Digital Circus? Yeah, it kind of flew under the radar. Nah, but in all seriousness, I'm pretty sure the pilot for this show has like over 300 million views as of recording this video. But even though that's the case, I still wanted to make this video just to show my genuine appreciation of this show. Because it is just a show that I feel like has been getting better and better with each episode. It has characters that I really enjoy. So I wanted to make a video just kind of showing my appreciation for this show and also to just talk about what I like about it. First thing I will talk about is the characters. Now, going back to the pilot of the show, I remember definitely liking it because the animation was very impressive that you normally see in like 2D rubber hose cartoons, and I just thought that was really cool. Now, I will admit, when I first watched the show, I didn't actually like all the characters. There were only really two that really stood out to me. The first one was Jax, because I could tell that he was kind of like going to be the troublemaker of this group. But then I also had a feeling that he was going to go through some sort of like arc where you realize there's more to him and that he's not actually that bad of a guy. Then the other character, who was definitely my favorite, was Kinger. I knew that I loved Kinger as soon as they did that joke where his like limbs started like flailing about, and I remember, and like his arms just kind of started shaking around. But then I remember going into episode 2 where the animation got a little better and they had the plot about how they're going to like this candy kingdom, and I remember liking it. But I will admit, I didn't exactly love it as much as the pilot. I think it was just that I didn't find the adventure to be as interesting initially. The cool thing was we did get a little more understanding of the larger narrative that was at work. Moving on to episode 3, that definitely became my new favorite episode. I thought the animation looked great. I loved the adventure that they went on. And on top of that, it focused on Kinger, who I already liked, but now this episode made me like him even more. We got to learn more about him and realize that when he's in the dark, he's actually kind of smart and more calm and less loopy. We also got to learn more about Zubul, and so I became more endeared to their character. They had this like plot line where they're constantly trying to change out their parts. I believe it's meant to be sort of like a metaphor to like gender dysphoria or like body dysmorphia. I think it's interesting that the show is able to convey this sort of idea through Zubul having the ability to swap out their parts. As someone who doesn't fully understand what it's like to have gender dysphoria, I feel like Zubul as a character kind of helps to provide some level of insight as to what it's like for those experiencing gender dysphoria. Moving on to episode 4, that was the one where they had to go to McDonald's basically. So Gangle works at McDonald's. And once again, there's another instance in which the episode focuses on a character who we didn't really know that much of, or we only got glimpses of in the previous episodes. And so now that they're given the highlight, I now end up liking them a lot more. I liked Gangle, but I didn't really care that much about her. I did feel bad when she got bullied by Jax, but that was about it. But then with this episode, we find out that she is a character who originally went to art school. We know that she likes to draw anime-inspired art. We know that she wanted to make a webcomic, but felt that it wasn't possible. And just seeing Gangle in this position where she's trying to like be positive, like because she has her like positivity mask, but it's not real, it's like fake. And then she tries to exert sort of this power over the other Digital Circus members in this fast food setting. It's just like kind of similar to episode 3, where it dived into topics like body dysmorphia. Episode 4 feels like it's almost diving into something like toxic positivity, because Gangle is trying to force this like image of herself as like this positive person when that's not really how she feels. And in a way, that kind of reflects maybe the feelings of all the other characters in the Digital Circus, where they're in this scenario that they're clearly not happy with. They want to escape the circus, but they can't, so they kind of have fallen into these roles. And Gangle's is that she is trying to hide how she feels with her masks. I mean, even the fact that she's using masks, I mean, that could be even linked to this concept called like masking, which is a thing that like autistic people do, where they try to hide their, I guess, neurodiverse traits. Now, I don't necessarily know if that was intentional. To be fair, I could be reading into it, but I feel like there is something interesting there. Ever since episode 3, I really feel like each episode improves on the previous one. Then we go into episode 5, and once again, I really liked it. At this point, Kane is starting to get annoyed that he's not able to, I guess, satisfy the Digital Circus members. He kind of notices that all the adventures he does isn't really being enjoyed or appreciated by the other members of the circus. So he decides to create an adventure based on the suggestion box, which is filled with all these different suggestions for various adventures. Episode 5 was really cool because we got more insight into all of the characters, not just one specifically. We got to learn more about Ragatha, Gangle, Zubul, and Pomni, and Jax. What? So this was the episode where I sort of felt a shift about which character was my favorite, because Kinger, I still really like Kinger. I think he's definitely that character I think is the funniest in the show, but I started feeling a little more interested in Jax. I think the reason is because we're starting to see more of him and realizing that there's more to him than just being the funny one. You know, one thing I like about this show is that I think it does a great job at building up to things. So much so that even though we're on episode 7, I still don't fully understand certain bits, like in the previous episodes that we've seen. I still don't really know what the deal is with Jax being scared of corn in episode 5. I don't know if that's gonna build up to something, or if that's just like a subtle thing that we get to theorize about. I don't know. I mean, it's funny and it's random, lol, but like, I don't know. I just don't really get it still. There's so many gags in this show that I just love. The sense of humor of the show is like so good most of the time.
Aren't you supposed to be submissive and agreeable?
For example, episode 5 had like the bit with the disappearing guy. That feels so much like internet humor, but like in the best way. Not like the bad, you know, like brain rot type way. Same thing like with the pilot when Kinger was like just flailing his arms around the place. It's like YouTube poop humor. This is YTP humor. I like when all the evil variants of the circus members showed up, and like evil Jax is just like Deku Midoriya. Like that's just funny as hell. Like I'm gonna be honest.
Hi, I'm Evil Jax.
I think it's meant to be maybe a reference to that meme from a while ago where it's like the evil version of like all these different people, but the evil version is just like the opposite version. So it's like, I don't know, an evil version of SpongeBob would be like, I work at the chum bucket and I hate jellyfishing. And it's like, it's not really evil. It's just the opposite of what SpongeBob is. And so I think maybe the show is referencing that, where some of the evil versions of the circus members are just like the opposite personality of the regular one. I think that was the inspiration for Evil Jax, because he's just like this super like small and meek version of Jax. Also, he's like a recolor too, you know. And then of course there's the gag with like Jax wearing a maid outfit. There's some cool dramatic bits where Jax and Ragatha's back and forth. Ragatha kind of cuts to the center of Jax, you know, goes too far, and Ragatha kind of has to deal with her own thing and how she kind of is like a people pleaser. And then you go into episode 6, which is just so good. I mean, really, like I probably rewatched this episode so much because the animation is just great. It's just another improvement. I love the concept because at this point, once again, Kane is getting even more just annoyed to the point where he's just like, you know what, whatever, you guys can just Digital Circus Battle Royale. And then I love the gag that when they actually start, Ragatha still has like 2 hearts because Jax shot her before the game started. There's the part where Gangle just grabs a Tommy gun and starts shooting all of her friends, you know, like that was pretty wholesome. You have the bit where like Ragatha is talking to Kinger and it's just like really cute, you know. This is why Kinger is great, guys. I'm telling you, I saw the vision. I was a day one Kinger fan, guys. And then of course you have the bit with Jax and Pomni actually bonding over being like villains. And it's interesting because even though Jax points out that all the characters kind of fall into these like rigid traits, we know that that's not really the case. We've seen all these characters evolve past their original roles that we've seen in the pilot. We've seen Gangle not be the sad one. We've seen Zubul not be the angry, cranky one. We've seen Kinger not be crazy and be actually quite calm. We've seen Ragatha not be nice and try to be a little bit more assertive. And well, funny enough, in this episode, we get to see a side of Jax where he isn't being the funny, nonchalant guy that we're used to seeing him as. I am probably the last person to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. The crash out that Jax has at Pomni near the end of the episode was just amazing. I love when Pomni just starts throwing stuff at Jax and just starts choking him on the ground. It's like really funny. And it's like a thing where even though it's so well acted and so well animated, you kind of know that everything that Jax is saying in that moment about how he sees everyone as playthings and how he doesn't actually care about Pomni is just an act, all right? He's putting up more of a mask than Gangle. Like, that is crazy. He has feelings and he is pretending like he doesn't. And then you go to the end of the episode where, like, after Kane does his favorite character awards, which, by the way, I love that before this episode came out, there was like this, I think it was on the Glitch YouTube channel where they had like posts. They had a thing where you could do a survey and you click on a link and it takes you to a website where you can actually vote on which character you like. I think I remember that if you try to pick characters that aren't Kane, eventually Kane will like start messing with the website to make it so that you kind of are forced to pick Kane. But I remember checking out the website and I thought it was really funny. So if I can find footage of it just to kind of put in this video, I'm gonna put it just so you know what I'm talking about. It was like really cute that they did that. But anyway, after Kane does his favorite character awards and he wins, or at least I think he won. Actually, no, wait, my bad. It was Ming that won. Sorry for assuming. We see Jax in the bathroom having like a realistic panic attack, and then he kind of is able to calm himself. And I really like the part where he looks in the mirror and he says like,
God, looks stupid.
which kind of makes it seem like it's like a moment of like, I guess, clarity where Jax is able to sort of understand that like the person that he sees is not really him. He hasn't really been able to think about that because he's kind of like everybody else falling into these roles, accepting his reality. But then he has these moments where he kind of is able to remind himself, or he's forced to be reminded of the situation that he's in, and he's forced to become kind of self-aware. And then that brings us to episode 7, which is the reason why I wanted to make this video, because this was a great episode, but it was also kind of a frustrating episode because of how confusing it is, and also because of the potential implications that it might have for later episodes. Episode 7 has so much going on that before I talk about it, I will say spoiler warnings, okay? I've already spoiled episodes 1 through 6, but still, I think if you haven't watched the show, just check it out. It's on YouTube, it's on Netflix. Hell, you know what? Even after I spoiled episode 7, you know what? Still watch it. I don't care. I think you should watch it without being spoiled because I think that makes it more fun. But even if you get spoiled, I still think you should watch it, honestly. All right, so spoiler warning over. So now, episode 7. It starts off with them just at the beach. You know, they're hanging out. All the circus members are at this digital beach, which was there the whole time, apparently. Most of them are having fun. You know, Pomni's hanging out with the smiling friends. You know, Gangle and Zubul are having a gay old time. It's like, it's wonderful. You know, it's awesome. But Jax is not having a good time. He's acting very out of character. And so he basically decides, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to leave. And then as he's leaving, Pomni takes notice of this NPC who's like kind of staring at her and beckoning her to come towards him. So then Pomni decides to, you know, check that out. And this is the same NPC character which we saw in previous episodes. I believe it was in like episode 5 where he's like peering behind a corner and we get to see him like doing that. We're like, oh, what's that about? Then we see Jax and he's in his room and he's just kind of in a bad place mentally. We can tell everything's all dark. He's looking at pictures of Kaufmo and Ribbit. I think this is the first time we've seen like a picture of what Kaufmo and Ribbit looked like, not just like little cartoon 2D pictures of them was what I'm talking about, I believe. And then we see Jax looking off into the distance, and then he sees these like weird creepy hands kind of walking towards him. You know, it's giving like a sleep paralysis demon type thing. You know, he can't move. And then the hands go towards him. He reaches out his hand, he touches it. And then we get this whole abstraction sequence, which I forgot to mention that is something that happens to the characters in this show, where sometimes they abstract and they turn into like these monsters, and then Kane has to take them and throw them into the cellar. And we don't fully understand how some of them abstract or why they abstract just yet. But this episode gives us more insight into how that works. So then Jax is like completely nude in this crazy looking void, and he's just like floating in this like crazy technicolor void while this like nice music is playing, and he starts looking almost at peace until he gets interrupted, and his eyes are the same colors as Kinger's wife's eyes looked like when she abstracted. So clearly Jax was about to abstract, is my takeaway. Seems to be the general takeaway. But anyway, Pomni interrupts Jax because he needs to tell Jax about the NPC, and this NPC says that he's actually a human, and he tries to help out the other members to escape the digital circus. And so they come up with this plan. Jax is kind of, Jax is encouraged to tag along, and so he does reluctantly. He brings him these keys in order to get into the Chinese room. The NPC reveals his name is Abel, and then he drops this like lore about the digital circus, and it kind of falls in line to what a lot of people were theorizing about how all the members are like in these tubes and that they're being experimented on, and then there's like this secret government. And I remember watching this episode and thinking like, man, they're dropping a lot of lore all of a sudden, huh? To be honest, I was a little underwhelmed. It feels weird that this is exactly what people thought the lore was gonna be. And I feel like I've seen this exact lore before, either in like episodes of Black Mirror or just some other like sci-fi piece of media, which isn't a bad thing. I was just thinking like, I'm surprised that they're just gonna play it that straight, like dang. I didn't think they would just go for like the simplest option, but I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, I'll see where this goes. So then they come up with this plan. Jax goes on a little dinner date with Kane in order to get the key, in order to get into Kane's office. This joke happens.
Have I ever told you how it's my dream to get eaten by you?
And before you ask, yes, this is my favorite joke of the episode. Jax does get the key from Kane, and they use the key to get into Kane's office. They have this bit where they're looking through this like room with all these different little spheres in them, and the spheres seem to be past adventures. There's this bit where Jax is looking at a snowy sphere, and it seems to be heavily implied that this was a past adventure that he went on when Ribbit and Kaufmo were still around, so that's kind of interesting. And then eventually they make their way into the control panel, and the control panel has two buttons. One ends the game and frees all the players, and the other one keeps the game going and all the players are stuck there. Pomni is having this whole sort of like struggle where she's not sure what to do. Zubul gets mad and wonders like, well, what the heck? Why don't you just pick that button that ends the game? Isn't that what we want? But Pomni's not sure because of what Abel had said to her earlier.
Make the right choice.
And on top of that, she also kind of wants to believe in Kinger, because Kinger has been shown that when he's put in the dark, he's actually quite smart. But the problem is, Kinger, even though he's in the dark, kind of isn't acting all smart just yet. And maybe it's because it's not dark enough because of the light coming off of the panel, that could be a reason. But either way, Pomni is not sure what decision is the right one to make. And so this causes an argument amongst all the other Digital Circus members. As this is happening, Jax is freaking out. We see these flashes of like a suburban neighborhood, and then the last quick flash that we see is of a POV shot of someone driving a car, which I'm assuming is Jax. And when this happens, Jax freaks out, pushes all the other members out of the way, and he slams his fist down on the red button. And then when this happens, Kane pops out and he reveals that the whole scenario in which they were trying to escape the circus was actually just an adventure that Kane designed from the beginning. None of it was actually real, and Kane was basically just messing with them. None of the lore that we heard of about CNA and about how there's these like tubes that are like housing people in order to experiment on them, none of that was true. The NPC that was actually human was actually just an NPC that Kane designed. It was all a lie. And unlike the previous adventures, where all the members of the circus are kind of like annoyed by the end, this one just was clearly too far, and all of them are just pissed, and rightfully so, because in the previous adventures, they kind of had already given up hope of ever escaping. But with this adventure, their hopes were actually kind of brought back, and so the fact that they were brought so close to what they thought would be like the actual escape of the circus, the return to the real world, only for it to be dashed right in front of them, it makes total sense why they're just like, this is enough is enough. And they're no longer annoyed with Kane, they are angry with him. And Kane sees this and realizes, oh snap. Because I guess the idea is, as far as I know, and as far as what's been shown, is that Kane is not a malicious AI. He is just doing his job, which is to entertain the members. But this episode does kind of make you question, like, if that's true, because who knows, he might have ulterior motives. Clearly he's able to lie to these people, but then also it makes us question just how much he's able to do, because we assume that he couldn't mess with the minds of these members, but maybe he can, like perhaps giving them a sauce that makes them act stupid, or turning them vegan, or maybe even messing with Jax's memories, giving him these quick flashes of the real world, manipulating him into pushing the button that would keep them stuck in the game. But then on top of that, it's like, do the buttons even do anything? If Pomni were to push the blue button, would that actually have worked, or would it have just not have worked? Because if this was all just a game that Kane designed, then probably wouldn't have done anything. Or actually, it probably would have just taken taken him to Shrimp Town. Would it have actually taken him to Shrimp Town? I don't know. That's why this episode is so good, yet so frustrating, because there's just so much about that makes you kind of interested and want to like dive into it. And there's so much discussion to be had, and I've seen it already, but it's still really fun. And I wouldn't have gotten to this point had I not stuck with the show since episode 1. And that's why I think the show is great. And that's one of the reasons why the show is so good. It's like you have great characters, great comedy, great animation, and very well laid out lore. Because even if you had a feeling that this whole, escaping of the digital circus was just kind of like too good to be true. I mean, hell, even Jax points out the possibility of this all being fake. It's like a thing where, much like the characters, you kind of hope that it could be real. You have a strong feeling that it could be fake, but you still want to believe. And yet your hopes are just dashed anyway. And it hurts so bad. You kind of end up feeling like the characters there, where you're so invested in the possibility now, a possibility that you didn't even think was possible, and now it's just all fake. And it's highly discouraging. Kane was literally turning into Am for a second here. And this is like shown perfectly with Jax in this episode. If Jax didn't believe that escaping the digital circus was possible, then why did he seem so like shocked and surprised that he was right? Clearly, there had to have been a part of him, even a small part of him, that believed that it could be real. So that's why he ended up kind of losing it at the end of this episode, because there had to have been at least a part of him that wanted to believe that he could escape the circus. At least that's how I think. And that's the thing with this show. Like, there's so much more I could talk about, but I would be going on, and this video would take way too long. So I'm just gonna end it with this. This show is great. This is just a great show. Everyone should watch it. Please watch it. I really believe that Glitch is a channel that is worth supporting and watching because of their output. It really feels like they're made by people who are passionate about what they're doing. If you're a fan of Glitch and you have the means to do so, definitely consider checking out their merch store. Even just something as simple as like spreading the word of this show, letting other people know about it, telling your friends about it is helpful. But I also did buy a poster, and it's a nice poster, I have to say. Very beautiful looking poster. I'm not even sponsored. I just really like Glitch. I mean, hell, the two founders of Glitch Entertainment, they used to have this show called SMG4. I'm sure you might have heard of it. When I was younger, I was such a big fan of that. And the fact that they went from that to running this channel that has like these amazing original animated series is so cool. So yeah, please support the show, support Glitch Entertainment, support the creators. Oh, and also Gameoverse looks so cool. I'm so ready. The red dinosaur is so cute. Oh my god.